The Robert Scott Bell Show.
All right, continuing now with I'd almost call it a man on the street interview, but it's the man on the Health Freedom Expo street. And right now I got a great man coming on board here, Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Andy, so nice to see you, my friend. It's great to meet you finally in person here at the Expo, and it's been wonderful. Got to attend an event that was, supporting your efforts as well. We all talk about so many things, but again, how's the time been at Health Freedom? Have they kind of looked at you funny and kind of said, "What are you doing here?" Are they going, "We're glad to have you on board"?
Well, no, it's one of the few places I go in the world where people don't look at me strangely anymore. So, Robert, it's great to talk to you again, and again to meet you in person. So, thank you.
You know, it is amazing to think about how your simple observations, and we've talked before on the air, your observations, simply reporting your observations became such a worldwide stir that you are now, persona non grata in some cases in the UK, in the medical profession, in the, what my friend John Rappaport calls the Church of Biological Mysticism. I mentioned that. That you have to go to a place and go, wow, I'm actually welcome here. I mean, would you have ever perceived that in your life, that you would be looking at a life that changes the way you can interact with the entire world?
No, mainstream medicine, that was what I was in, that's what I was doing. You report your observations, and, they're right or wrong, and time will tell. But this met with the most vitriolic reaction, the most extraordinary reaction, because, of course, it went right to the heart of public health policy and challenged profits and questioned whether vaccines had actually been properly tested for safety. And the more I got into it, the more concerned I became. Mm-hmm. And you come to a point, do you back away or do you keep going? And it seemed to me that the professional, the logical, and the compassionate course was to keep answering the questions.
Yeah, and it seems that some people say if they knew what they were getting into, right, they might have chosen a different path. I'll give you an example. Gary Matsumoto wrote a book, Vaccine A, all about the squalene adjuvant, the MF59 that was added to the anthrax shot that was given to a lot of the troops, some of the British soldiers as well, the American soldiers that exhibited the Gulf War illness. He wrote an expose, just observed, reported the science. And he thought, I'm being a good guy. I'm a reporter. That's what I do. He was met with such viciousness and attacks that he said, you'll never work again, basically. They pulled him. He was a mainstream ABC reporter and such, and appearing on TV and nationally as a reporter. Suddenly, no jobs. And he confided at the time, if I knew, I might not have made the decision. How do you look at your life now, having made the decision to simply do what I believe to be the right thing? And I know you do as well, but look at what's happened. I mean, do you say, wow, do I make a different decision, or do you deal with where you are now and this is your mission?
Well, you meet a couple of trigger points along the way, and one was during the original paper. And my colleagues, some of them said to me, maybe we can report the bowel disease, but maybe we should not mention the parental reports of regression after MMR vaccine. Mm-hmm. I said, you can't do that. You can't censor the science. You're beholden to these people. You can't censor their story. It either stands or it doesn't stand, but don't take it out just because it's inconvenient. So you meet these sort of points along the path where you can go one way or another, and you try and pursue what is right. Now, I've met Gary, and I talked to him down in Austin. He's living in Austin now.
Oh, wonderful to hear. I hope he's doing okay.
He seemed good,
Okay.
But again, there was a clear tinge of regret and missing what was clearly a very, very prestigious job that he was doing as a foreign correspondent. And
well, he must have felt for you going through what you're going through, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we had some stories to share, for sure. But coming back to the original question, no, I like to think that I would do exactly the same thing again. The way in which it was done might be subtly different with hindsight, but no, in essence, what I was doing was simply a job. Mm-hmm. It wasn't particularly brilliant, or it wasn't particularly brave. It was just seeking to answer the parental questions and do what was right for the children. Yes,
and we continue to find more and more gastro-intestinal inflammatory diseases, and I don't mean only among children, but I think this has become a rampant, I dare say epidemic, but it's not in that sense, but so much of my interaction from my own starting point to the point of people helping people, even here at the Health Freedom Expo, that want to be well, and you look and you see and you can sense that this is a problem that is much larger than even that small observation, but maybe it could be a lightning rod, a focal point of attention to understand where disease really originates in this case.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating, particularly from a gastroenterological point of view, that we are what we eat, and the gut is at the core of so much health. Gut bacteria are now emerging as a main player in not only your immune health, but in fact in your behavior and the development of your brain. It's a fascinating field.
That is stunning. When I started learning about the microbiome and the flora just producing things that were considered brain chemicals, and you were relying upon the microbial world, for which modern medicine, all the way back to Pasteur, declared war upon it. That it was the microbe that was our enemy, and it turns out just the opposite. We are wholly dependent upon the microbial world for our very existence.
Yes, exactly. And I was at a meeting recently where a scientist described us as, in terms of our metabolism, as 9 parts bacteria, 1 part human, which is a very humbling observation.
Yes.
But they could take animals and they could predict how that animal would respond to acetaminophen in terms of toxicity, based not upon when they'd received the drug, but just based upon their urinary bacterial metabolites.
Really?
What bacteria they had in their gut determined whether they would live or die in the face of an acetaminophen overdose.
Wow.
It's your gut bacteria. You look after them. Make sure they're healthy, because you need them.
Well, absolutely. It's funny. It always reminds me of, was it Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? In the end, you find the mice were running the whole place and the humans were the experiments. These microbes are, running the whole show. And yes, it's very humbling, but it's very empowering once you learn that, because some of the greatest teachers, whether they be in the realm of the Rudolf Steiner, if we go back to Antoine Béchamp, if we go back to Claude Bernard, right? And these are the people that are all the unsung heroes to me, because Pasteur got all of the glory. He knew the emperor. It's always been about who you know. That now we're coming back to that understanding that the terrain, the milieu, the environment really establishes what kind of life grows there. And it's quite opposite to what we have been in the Western world taught and brought up in an allopathic viewpoint, that we must somehow conquer that world in order to restrain it from killing us all the time.
Yes, we must understand it and we must live with it in harmony. And these systems are set up so early on, right from the moment we're born. The acquisition of the bugs in our gut determine our long-term health. And we showed some years ago that the way in which you were born, by vaginal delivery or cesarean section, and therefore the way in which you acquired your gut flora, either from your mother or from the hospital, determined whether you had a long-term risk of Crohn's disease or not. You may not develop the disease till you're 30 years of age.
Right.
But the way in which you were born, and therefore likely your pattern of exposure to gut bacteria, was going to determine your risk of disease.
At the time, in the 1960s, doctors were even more godlike. There's more humbling experiences happening to the medical profession, we know now. But they said to my mom, hey, breast milk, you don't need that. Your kid doesn't need. We got great stuff. It's better than what you got. Here, this can of powder, just mix some water in it, have your kid drink it. And I projectiled that stuff out as fast as I could, which that's how I knew I was a smart kid, right? But the point is, you adapt. If you are given even inadequate foods, you find a way to survive, right? And it's amazing. That's the adaptation syndrome, that we find a way, but it's not optimal. It's not ideal. You got to tuck away certain toxins, some of the imbalances or corruptions of the gut ecology, and that way, if you don't get the colostrum, if you don't get the breast milk, which now, literally, the new terrorists in America are not, Islamo-fascists. They are Amish farmers producing milk that is raw and real, and the simple act of wanting to provide that to a community becomes a criminal act now.
It isn't extraordinary. The control that people have over the way in which people run their lives is extraordinary, even in America, and it's tragic. I think the wonderful thing about coming to this meeting and talking to people here is that you embrace a group of people who are of a like mind.
Yes.
You may agree or disagree with their precise point or the way in which they are doing what they're doing, but their perception of health freedom is essential to the survival of medicine as I know it, medicine as I understand it, and that is not a medicine that is controlled by big industrial interests, to big pharmaceutical companies, and effectively corrupt or incompetent governments.
Yeah, isn't that the point? As I've said so many times here, someone that works in natural medicine coming back from the allopathic upbringing that I had, I don't throw the allopathic side of the water, out. It's not my purpose in doing so. I want to see accountability. I would like to see real science emerge, because I embrace that and try to bring that to my audience as well as you've done just by reporting on that. And it's still astonishing, and I still sometimes will hear people that doesn't happen. Really? I used to get that a lot more when I've reported this. Oh, come on. You mean a doctor's going to be attacked because he's not prescribing enough drugs? Yes, I know these doctors personally. they were tracking prescription rates and watching them go down as the doctor became more holistically oriented and nutrition oriented. And suddenly they were investigated by the board. No complaints from the patients, but simply there was a controlling interest coming back to that corporate control of medicine. And, of course, the government involvement therein.
Yeah, and I've had the same thing in interviews where I've been accused of being conspiracy theorist, and I say, I've never mentioned that. I've never mentioned the word conspiracy. That is your word to the interviewer. And I say, I see it as a ruthless pragmatism. They're protecting their interests. And you only have to go to, I think I said it to, I can't remember his name, one of them. I said to him, you don't need to talk about conspiracy. If you looked at the Merck memos coming out of Australia in the Vioxx litigation, the internal memos, talking about doctors who dissented from the safety of Vioxx, and one Merck employee to another saying, we may have to seek them out and destroy them where they live.
Yes.
I mean, that is corporate policy, emerging corporate policy. What an extraordinary...
That's warfare language.
That is warfare language.
Yeah.
Seek them out and destroy them where they live. This is a corporate executive talking about how they will treat doctors who do not approve of their drug. And the legacy of that, of course, is that Merck then has to pay millions and millions and millions in compensation for people who were damaged from that product. So you don't even need to discuss conspiracy theory when you're talking corporate policy.
We call it conspiracy fact, right? And there's something that you talk about a warlike atmosphere. I mentioned it just from the paradigm, if you will. But if you look at the idea of conquer, attack, find out where they are and destroy them, it just so much reminds me of the antibiotic paradigm. I mean, it used to be in modern medicine they utilized, for instance, silver. I talk about silver a lot. Or other, even botanicals to address these things, because in nature we have things that we have validated, and even with peer-reviewed published literature, have an antimicrobial property that don't have the same destructive impact, like a napalm bomb going off in the intestinal system, whether it be from vaccination or whether it be from the antibiotics or antimicrobials, because the antifungal drugs and antiviral drugs can also show high liver toxicity and inflammatory results within the gastrointestinal system as well. So we got to grow up. And I say the modern medicine, if you will, that has to grow up and start taking ownership, responsibility. Go, okay, all right, this is what we do. And okay, fine. If you do it and I want it, then I'll come to you. But don't pretend that you're something that you're not.
Yeah, and don't make it the only option. Don't tell me I can't go to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very very important. Like you said, in freedom, if we would embrace that, and the docs that I love so dearly, and yourself included, embrace that freedom. Also, the innovation that comes from the ability to exchange ideas, to observe things, and say, hey, that's what peer review used to be about. I observed this. Look at this. Hey, let's discuss this. Is this, did I do something wrong? Oh, wow. But now it's like a complete censorship game as opposed to genuine innovation. Let's find out the next breakthrough, and let's tout that legitimately.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take autism as an example, I've never met a disease for whom there are so many experts, and yet we know nothing. How can you be an expert in a disease about which so little is known? And yet it's littered with people who are... There's a very interesting debate going on at the moment, as you probably know, the change from the DSM-4 revised to DSM-5. In other words, they are deliberately changing the diagnostic criteria. It seems to exclude pervasive developmental disorder and Asperger's from a diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder. Now, the effect of that will be to reduce the number of children who are eligible for services. But what in fact this is an interesting psychological game. That one of the tragedies for this disorder is it fell into the hands of child psychiatrists rather than doctors who think about medicine in an organic way. Let's put that right first before we assume it's a psychological or behavioral disorder.
Right.
Now, it's rather like this changing DSM in the face of all of the deficiencies in our knowledge.
Yes.
What are they doing? Fiddling around with the diagnostic criteria. And it reminds me of a story of the two cockerels in the farmyard. One old cockerel and the young cockerel.
All right, for our American audience, they don't even know what a cockerel is.
What is a cockerel? What do you call it?
Are we talking about a bird?
A male hen. Yeah.
Yes, a male hen. I thought so, but the thing is, we can't assume. I love the language differences, but the cockerel, okay, so the male, so it's the cock, it's the rooster. Right?
The rooster, okay. The old rooster, the young rooster, okay, and the young rooster comes in and he starts taking over all the young hens. And the old rooster looks at this, and rather than confronting the young rooster, he goes and starts making love to a rusty bucket. And he pretends that he's doing the right thing. Hey, check my rusty bucket. But what he's doing is displacement activity. He's doing something that he's pretending is important when it's a complete and utter waste of time.
Yes.
And that is exactly what is going on in the changing diagnostic criteria for autism. It is displacement activity, and the failure of any progress coming from child psychiatry. They're indulging in this process of changing the diagnostic criteria. Medicine has lost its way.
Well, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break here. I want to talk to Dr. Andrew Wakefield about some of the emerging, let's say, corrective things that you've identified. We'll discuss some of those things. And, who knows what else. It's such a pleasure to have you on board here and finally connect with you in person at the Health Freedom Expo, an ideal place to connect on such an important topic. So we'll be right back after this.
Robert Scott Bell.
We continue on here, the Healing Path with Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and he's with me at the Health Freedom Expo. And again, having a great time here. A lot of people with kind words. I mean, it's nice to see you embraced as you walk around and people learn, oh, that's Andrew Wakefield. And they like you. They really like you. Kind of like Sally Field at the Academy Awards so many years ago. And, well, again, I'm just happy to see that this community and crowd understands what you're doing and how important and significant it is. And it's not that we want to see anybody martyred. And to some degree, you're not, because you're still here. You're alive. You're kicking, and you're fighting back, too, which we love. But if we talk about the big deal, if you're a doctor, you're in it to heal and help people. I mean, that would be the true kind of motivation. And I'm not saying everybody's motivated accordingly, but it seems to me that your place, your heart, so to speak, is in the right place because you're trying to get information out that really is going to help people. Yeah,
I mean, my commitment, the way I went into medicine in the first place, was to care for people who are sick. And that hasn't changed. And I like to think that I've stayed true to that throughout. I didn't go into it to become a shill for the pharmaceutical industry or to necessarily follow government policy just because it was government policy, but to put the interests of the patient first and foremost.
Yes, and if we look at putting that, just like you said, the patient first and foremost, now we got to say, okay, we identify gastrointestinal inflammation, damage, etc. What do we do now? Now, we talked about the microbiome, the flora, and there's a lot of science coming out about the healing aspect of putting the right kind of flora in. But what concerns me is that we have taken the Amazon rainforest and just stripped it and turned it into a desert in there. And we're thinking, can we just throw that in? So if you have any insight, things that you found to be efficient and effective, if you're comfortable speaking about it, it would be, just kind of throw it out there as what you're seeing.
Of course. I mean, the things that were, first of all, we discovered, the children had profound symptoms. The children, regressive autism, often onset following a vaccine, and gastrointestinal symptoms. Put to one side, child's got autism, they're entitled to have diarrhea 12 times a day. No, they're not. No. They've got something fundamentally wrong with their gut, and it may well be linked to their behavior, an insight provided by the parents. So what do we find really, really works for these children? Well, firstly, you need a diagnosis. Let's get the diagnosis. Let's find the inflammation, define what it is. Is it Crohn's? Is it colitis? Is it some other form of inflammation? Is it food allergy? That gives us a starting point for the appropriate treatment. One of the most effective things in the early years has been the gluten casein-free diet. Now, that was a parental insight. Yeah. It was then subjected to rigorous science, and there are now 4 papers out of controlled clinical trials showing benefit. So that is a very exciting observation, an endorsement of the parental observation. Right. Anti-inflammatory medication, so the standard things that you would use for Crohn's or colitis. We found that probiotics, and there's a lot of work now on probiotics being effective. So you've got the diet, the prebiotic, you've got the probiotic, the actual bacteria themselves or the microbes. Have you seen any evidence of supporting, we talk about anti-inflammatories, looking at more natural mechanisms like the increasing omega-3 intake, for instance? It's not been looked at in a formal sense, but again, the anecdotal impression from parental experience and the collective experience of physicians using this is that there's benefit. Yes. Nutritional supplementation, so replacing the things in which the child may be deficient, is terribly important, and particularly when you start treating the bowel disease, because if you treat the bowel disease and these things start to be absorbed and utilized and the child starts to grow, they're going to need more than before, because they're assimilating them into protein and to other bodily structures. They need an excess, not just the baseline level. They need more, because suddenly they've got this huge growth spurt. And this is one of the things that we see quite dramatically in children with Crohn's or children with this autistic bowel disease is
Sure.
once you start treating them, take the brakes off their growth, then they go through this dramatic growth spurt, and they need excessive or additional supplementation.
Yeah, I think in terms of deficiencies, if you can't assimilate, of course, and you're in a growing child, your development is going to be harmed in so many and probably every way. And it makes sense if you, as you said, pull the brakes off. I like that. Suddenly now the body's going, okay, we can go back into growth and healing. Now, I liken this to what cellular biologist Bruce Lipton. Have you ever met Bruce yet?
No,
Bruce Lipton?
I haven't.
Oh, sensational. I mean, he lights up a room. And this guy, is top level. He's taught in medical schools and, published, etc. And he wrote about the biology of belief, the biology of complementary medicine, and found that the cell could be in one of two places. It's either in growth and healing or it's in protection, kind of fight or flight. It can't do both. It's either trying to defend itself or it's in that motion, reproduction, growth, etc. And so what you're talking about is taking it out of that fear, fight, or flight and putting it back into growth and healing exactly the same way he, as a cellular biologist, described brilliantly. So it confirms a lot of things that we've been looking at for many years.
And the other thing to bear in mind, that's a fascinating observation. I've got to go and read that. But
I like it.
Is that if you don't get these children, if you don't correct that failure to thrive, if you don't address that issue before a certain age, before puberty, then there's going to be permanent growth failure. So it's very, very important to recognize it early, and to get on and treat it aggressively, and replace those nutritional deficiencies.
Sure.
Provide the extra energy that they're going to need for cellular metabolism and growth, and get them to where they should be.
I would say one of the keys that I've seen also is a depletion of selenium because of the binding out of the heavy metals, the mercury. I mean, that takes it away no matter what it is. That to me is a number one. It's not like I'm an isolationist in that sense, but I found tremendous benefit by replenishing the selenium that is bioavailable. To suddenly now, we talk about excess, we've got to, bind out that which is accumulated. Now, I utilize, of course, homeopathic medicines to also alert the body and try to start dumping these things as well. But the point is that there's a lot of assault or insult present that needs to be bound and brought out. The liver, the pathways, phase 1, phase 2 need to be enhanced as well.
Absolutely. So, and I think there's now a very good paper that's come out of Jim Adams at the University of Arizona showing that nutritional supplementation, quite apart from diet and everything else, is beneficial to these children. So clearly there are deficiencies. Those deficiencies have probably been present for many years and have become quite serious by the time the children actually come to see us, and they need correction.
And I see another thing when I talk about toxicological assault. We're talking a generational decline. I've seen this with animals that have shorter lifespan, talking with veterinarians that identified that the vaccine site-specific cancers associated with yearly shots like rabies, etc., they began to instruct their veterinary students that when you go out and do this, now you must move the vaccine every year, yet they're still seeing cancers. So we also see links to much worse than even the autism spectrum as well. But if we look at the toxicological measurements, even in cord blood, in placental fluids, toxins, nanotech from sunscreens, for instance. I mean, there's a lot of things that are depleting even in utero, so they're coming out already, with a lot of, let's say, X's on them, to add to the insult where maybe we're seeing more of these overt extreme reactions to vaccines than we did before when we were healthier, so to speak.
Right, because our immune system is already compromised and we simply can't handle it, or we're already in a state of oxidative stress and we just can't deal with it. And as Dr. Landrigan from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York has, in fact, described this as a massive toxicological experiment on our children. Of course, it's not a scientific experiment because it wasn't intended. There are no endpoints, there are no measurements. There is just, as you say, a declining effect in the population, a detrimental effect across the board that is a generational effect that will get worse and worse.
Yes. Well, I think that they either have to acknowledge that, or which it can be embarrassing for some, that the entire vaccine agenda, the schedule, is not based on sound science, but politics and economics. And that, is something they're reticent to do, as by evidence by their attack on you for simply observing and reporting on what you saw.
Yes. I think there's a lot to cover up, a lot to hide. I think that the truth is they know. I think that the truth is they know to the extent that they do not want to do, for example, a comparison of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children, because they've already anticipated what that result may be. And so there is a huge effort, an ongoing effort, by those with vested interest to prevent the science being done that looks at vaccine safety issues. And that is a tragedy, because at the end of the day, what it's going to do is compromise public confidence in public health officials and their decision-making across the board.
Yeah, and I would agree that that needs to happen. There was a healthy skepticism at the origins of this country. I don't know so much about English history. My wife grew up for a number of years there in Oxfordshire, and she could tell me more about it. But the idea that we would look and regard our government with suspicion, that they would inevitably kind of do things that would not be in our best interest because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're seeing that with the embracing, if you will, or the enmeshing of the medical and the governmental institution. You hear about the separation of church and state. I've called for a separation of medicine and state. I don't like the intermingling because it's created a scenario where here in the States where, as a homeopath, in most states, I can't hang a shingle. It's against the law. To do what? Something that can harm no one. And so it isn't for me, but it's for all healers, because there are healers from all pathways, all walks. Some are medical, some are not. And in a true free society, we would embrace all of them and say, this is who you are, this is who I am. I'm not pretending to be you, you're not pretending to be me, but we'll be truthful about what we do, and we can interact. My best buddies in the world are MDs. I thought they would hate me for talking like this. They've embraced it because they recognize the same problem we're dealing with.
Yes, I think the tragedy is for medicine, it's that doctors have become agents of the state. Particularly so pediatricians. And in the UK, to compound that, then, for example, to get bonuses, you had to meet a certain vaccine uptake. You had to give excess of 95% of your vaccines to your childhood patients, or you will not get your bonus. And so general practitioners became dependent upon that income, and the government had them where they wanted them. Right,
economic incentive. And of course, here in the States, when you go through these medical training programs, you may come out with $500,000 in debt now. And of course, if you are going to be able to repay that debt, you better play along with what they tell you to do. So there's more of that economic game, and it becomes almost like a mafia type of war, that this is how we can control those that are coming up in the ranks. And it's so far from when you start at the origin, I want to go, and I grew up little, I said, I want to be a healer, right?
Yeah.
To be in that, at a certain point, I realized that I can't do it. It's against, it would hurt me. I would be ill physically to do that which they did to me growing up. So, as I said, to your credit, and I'm not tooting your horn because we appreciate you here, but I really do appreciate your willingness to not only stand up, but to speak out and to be public about it. Not because in many ways, as you said, you're not gaining financially. You haven't gained in stature in your community, so to speak. I mean, quite the opposite has happened, yet you're still here. And as I said, you'd like to think you'd make the same decision, maybe with a little more foresight, just like Gary Matsumoto. If he had known, would he have changed that decision? But certainly in the art of Kung Fu, you like to know the enemy you're dealing with. And many of us grew up, didn't realize how big and bad they are, those guys that pretend to be our good guys and our good friends, until we go, hey, wait, what's that over there? So it changes a lot.
It changes a great deal. No, it's a fascinating learning experience. One day I'll put it all down on paper and pass that learning experience on to young medical students and say, guys, this is the way it is, and this is the way you've got to play the game.
I would look forward to reading that as well and getting that out. You have an open door policy here on the Robert Scott Bell Show to get this out. And as things progress that we can't talk about today, I recognize, but there is an organization that's supporting some of your efforts. Can we at least mention them and their website? Is that allowed?
Yes, certainly. There is an effort to... I filed a case, and that's perfectly... we can talk about that. I filed a case against in defamation against Brian Deere, the journalist, and against the British Medical Journal and its editor-in-chief, Dr. Fernie Godley, for defamation. And they may well be coming over here to the state of Texas to face those charges. Now, there is a legal fund for that. It's called the Dr. Wakefield Justice Fund, and you can go to that website, drwakefieldjusticefund.org, and hopefully, if you're motivated to make a contribution.
We'll have that linked up at the blog at robertscottbell.com. Dr. Wakefield, it's a pleasure to connect with you in person, and I look forward to keeping up with the updates. As I said at the event the other night, I want to keep, because we know that the old media, they're not friendly to this kind of information. They're not going to help us in any way to do what we're doing. I'm not asking them for help nor their permission. So we're going to do the end around. We're going to out-create them, as we've always done with Natural News, Mike Adams, and others that are doing great work. And, just like I said, just give me a shout-out. We'll stay in touch, and whatever we can relate to the rest of the world that is ready to hear this and will help support these efforts, we're going to get that out.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Dr. Andy Wakefield, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
We've got lots more healing to do on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Stay with us.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Welcome to the United States of Health Talk Radio. Health Talk
that doesn't suck.